So as I said in the beginning, United Vision for Idaho has been around for about 30 years, and I've had the honor of serving as director for the last 15. And a lot has changed in 15 years, both for the good and the bad. So I just want to briefly talk about how we got here. So about 2016, we made an effort to go to the places that were being recruited, extreme groups were recruiting. And if you'll remember, it was when we were seeing like a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in Twin Falls, Idaho Falls, Mountain Home kind of area, right? And so we knew that the right was really organizing in those areas, and we knew that we had to go be in those places and working with communities. And so we really made a calculated decision to do less work at the State House, welcome by the way, to really think about what was it going to take to build the kind of power, people power that we needed. So some of you know that we also have a C4, United Action for Idaho. And so what we did was through United Vision for Idaho, we went to those communities. For 2.5 years, we went to those communities. And we asked one question: what hurts? What would make a difference in your life, that of your family, and your community? And we started developing a list. And it was amazing, and I'll never forget the moment when I'm sitting in these rooms and people came, but they also looked at me like, I don't even know why I'm here. Nothing that I think is gonna make a difference. Nothing that I do is gonna make a difference. But then we started talking, and people started recognizing that people that they live next to, that maybe they never really talked to about any of these issues before, actually had a lot of the same needs. And there was like a spark that went off. Like maybe, just maybe, we could do this together. And so we created what we called the Idaho People's Platform. I'm looking at Solna Arias from People's Action because it was a People's Action platform. And we wanted to really tailor that to Idaho and to communities. And so we took that list and we went back to everyone that we had talked to. We said, did we get it right? What needs to come off this list and what needs to go on this list? So we vetted it. And then we knocked, in this, then what we did is our C4 issued a candidate questionnaire. It's one of my favorite moments because we issued a 13-page questionnaire to every candidate running that year. And everybody was very angry with me. What do you mean it's a 13-page questionnaire? Democrats, Republicans alike, didn't matter, right? And I said, that's fine. Don't respond to these folks one more time. They're used to that. But when you do, we'll be publicizing the fact that you failed to return your questionnaire. So we got flooded with questionnaires. And from there, the communities decided that each candidate wanting our sponsorship could only deviate by 1 point on the platform. It wasn't which point, right? Just only 1 point. The agreement was that those folks would then meet with these folks in these communities before they supported or endorsed any legislation that directly affected any one of these issues. We ended up endorsing 13 candidates. And from there, communities, neighbors, everyone came together and we knocked 10,000 doors. And in that election, these areas turned purple for the first time in my memory. Now, we ended up electing 6 of those. But it wasn't even just about the election. It was about what had happened in these communities. And we knew that you can't just come in and do this work for a cycle. You have to invest in those communities. So we continued to go back and we led workshops. We provided resources. COVID hit and we were doing Zoom trainings about how to go talk to city council, and all of these things were happening. But COVID happened, right? And it made it impossible for us to be in physical space with folks. And many of the people that work with us, are at risk. So it was a real conundrum. And we knew that the election was coming up, right? The 2020 election. And we had to keep reaching out. We had access with People's Action to a text-based program that allowed us, what we did was we tried to transition our program in a text-based outreach to reach as many people as we could. And so this time we did how are you and your family doing? And we reached 1.2 million people in Idaho. This is the amazing part. It is only one scripted question, and then people get a guide to help them transition through all of these conversations. We had therapists that were coming to us, counselors who were saying, we have so many people that are coming into our offices because there's so much political division, and we've never had to address that. We don't know what to do. Can we participate in this program? So over the course of this 9 months, folks, you're coupled with a human being. We had 7 to 9 typical exchanges back and forth. And over that 9-month period, less than 1% of the people that we reached out to opted out. And it was game-changing for organizing because we were all struggling with what to do. And it was like, wow, maybe this could be a thing that we incorporate, especially in a state like Idaho, where it's very, very expensive to go and organize in that way. Vast distances. We were going 8-10 hours away. And now we're actually talking to people. So after the 2020 election, it was really just like the division in our country and in the state is so stark. What is going on? And I think that the progressive movement has made a lot of mistakes, one of which is to treat people like monoliths. The other is to think that we understand before we've even asked. And so this time we reached out to people in Idaho to start with that are susceptible to recruitment, that are living in areas where there really isn't a political infrastructure or progressive infrastructure at all, and people who are likely involved in some of those movements. This time the question is, our country may be more divided than it's ever been. What do you think is causing this? We have a 62-page searchable narrative guide to help pivot whatever someone says to you to deepen those conversations, all led with curiosity, empathy, non-judgment. And so we asked people, People's Action helped. We had a whole bunch of people from all over the country, all over Idaho, texting. And it was amazing what was happening. People were responding. Because I think one thing to really understand is the isolation and loneliness that people feel living in these communities. And then COVID just brought a whole nother layer of that. So we reached out, and then from what people tell us, only if they specifically say it do we tag something so that we can kind of start to understand what is it that's actually dividing us? And is it different? Is it different in different places? So from self-declaration, we record social and political identity, associations, perceived greatest threats, perceived greatest risks, pain points, trusted sources of information, and where do you get that information? That's helpful, it's very helpful. But what's better is that we had at that time, we had 500 volunteers from across the country reaching out. Most people that are aligned with progressive movements who'd never talked to a rural person in their lives. And the training we found was incredibly transformational for the people doing the outreach because we're not accustomed, just like JR was so aptly pointing out, right? We're not accustomed to having these kinds of conversations. And anything that we do that we get good at takes practice. And it was also keeping people safe. So everything that's said back and forth is downloadable verbatim. So we can understand the language that people are using to make context out of their worlds. And we can understand what we say and whether that works, if it allows us to deepen the conversation, and just as important, if it doesn't. Because we have to be changing and figuring out new ways and new strategies to do this kind of work if we want to be successful. So that was in 2020. Today, 2023, it is a national program. It's a program that we partner with a lot of national organizations on, including People's Action, Showing Up for Racial Justice. We have many, many partners in the field who saw the need for this work and really helped to elevate it. I say this to you, all Idahoans in the room. I want you to just pat yourself on the back for a second, because this has really been game-changing in the social justice movement, and it came from Idaho. Okay, came from Idaho. So today we have reached out to, we are in our 6th state. So we've got Idaho, North Carolina, Georgia, New York, Oregon, and we just launched in West Virginia. Our goal is to reach all of the states and all of the places where people are being left out, and all of these places are being sacrificed to organizers who are doing things that are not in none of our best interests, right? So how do we be there? What you might find fascinating is that these conversations literally last days, if not weeks at a time. We have text people who who know who we are. The first thing they say to us is, no one from your side has ever reached out to me to ask me what I think or what I feel for. And we just did a preliminary study of sentiment analysis based on 800 conversations in Idaho. And so the scoring is -1, okay, is like, let's just say not pleased, right? Angry. 0 is neutral, and +1 is positive. The folks that we were reaching out to in Idaho came in at -4. But so the typical, right, this sample was 25 exchanges back and forth. And as I said, these conversations last days and weeks. After the 15th exchange back and forth, they went to neutral. From 16 to 25, they went to positive, and they never reverted back to neutral or to negative. It's game changing. It also is really a lesson and a wake-up call for our movements about our strategies. How are we trying to reach people? Are we humanizing them? Are we offering compassion? Are we offering empathy? Are we giving people an offering? Are we giving people the ability to change their minds? Or are we fixing them in place because of a bad vote, a bad decision, or circumstances and factors that we just don't know or understand? Many of the texters that are doing the outreach said, I didn't understand. What do you mean there isn't a hospital or a clinic in your town? The nearest one is 100 miles away. What do you mean there are no jobs? What do you mean the schools can't stay open 5 days a week because there isn't the funding for it? What do you mean you don't have a fire station? And it was like, oh, wow, well, maybe the system hasn't been working for them either, right? And the folks that we're reaching out to often say, I didn't understand when you first reached out to me, but you really just want to hear what I think. And we'll hear some really horrible things sometimes, right? So for example, if someone says the reason we're more divided than we've ever been is because of all the Black people. One of our folks might say, well, that's really interesting, Laura. Would you mind sharing with me when you first started developing your ideas around race? What did life look like? What was your community? What did your community look like? Were there moments or experiences that you had that reinforced this belief that you hold? Are there moments that you've had that contradict the belief that you just shared? And when people have the opportunity to unpack all the things, right? We are all products of our environments. But given the opportunity to unpack that, it's where you really start seeing the hypocrisies, right? And it's not what we say, it's what they say. I don't know. I guess I just was raised that way. I guess I don't really know why I still believe that. Maybe I just didn't understand. All of those things start to come to light when we start having conversations. But we also have to believe, first, that people have the ability to change. We all do. Thank goodness. I would hate if something I did or said when I was 20 fixed me in a place where I couldn't have changed and evolved over time, developed my thinking and my understanding and deepened my compassion. We change, but we need to be given the opportunity and the grace for that change to occur. So, going to stop talking. This is the program. This is Bree Xandrick. She is our associate director, UVI's associate director. Our program is distinct, and we named it this purposely to distinguish from everything else that's happening. ARC, authentic.
We'll talk about that right now.
Can I just do that?
Yeah, it's so nice, like I say.
I'll let you say it.
Thank you.
Bree's going to talk about it, but here is a QR code. This outreach happens every single day of the week. Because again, practice. We have to practice what we get good at. And it's changing our orientation about how to have these conversations across difference. And it's fundamental if we want to build a world that we all share, where we can thrive and survive and build the justice and equity that we all need in this world. So you can participate. We have a really robust training program. We have lots of resources, and we have an incredible team.
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Adrienne. So I appreciate Adrienne giving all that context, because we need to understand where it came from, where this idea came from, and kind of the why as to why it exists. So in our actual training, it's a full 6-hour training. It's 2 days. They talk about a lot of things. But today you're gonna get a nice abridged version, and you're gonna learn some skills, or we're gonna do some activities. And even if you've done our training before, I'm looking at my people back there, we're actually trying out some new stuff. So everyone will be excited today. So once Kyle hops on, we can go to the next slide. Also, get prepared. Today's gonna be very interactive. Get to know your neighbors, just like we just did. Sorry that I had to bust out that arc. It was what I was about to say. So Adrienne talked about arc and arrow. Very clever play on words. Authentic relational conversations. That's arc. It's the practice of engaging in empathetic conversation with people from different viewpoints to heal divides and build community. Different viewpoints. Taking that even further, we go into arrow. Beautiful image, right? An arc and an arrow. Arrow is authentic relational organizing. That's the approach of developing and utilizing authentic relationships to bring about change and create an inclusive democracy. So we use ARC to complete that arrow. And today the training that we're doing is the ARC training, learning to have those conversations. Let's talk about polarization. So why is polarization so much higher? Why are we seeing it steadily increase? Why are we watching friends and family be stripped away or stripped out of our lives because now we can't be together because of an issue? So there's a lot of reasons, but one reason is because the internet has enforced the formation of very large echo chambers. We're going to talk a bit about echo chambers today, so don't worry, we will get to that. But polarization is a huge barrier. It stands in the way of unity and community coming together, and we have to go after that. So that's kind of what this training does, both internally and with the people we talk to. So echo chambers. What are echo chambers? How many people have heard of an echo chamber? Okay, most people. And if you haven't, now you have. That was a trick question. So an echo chamber, we talk about the other side rather than talking to them. And when I say other side, I don't love to use those terms, so I'm going to refer to it as more of an issue stance, right? I don't want to create an othering of other people, but for simplification, that's what I'm talking about. They're not included in the conversation. They're not in the echo chamber. They're outside, and we're talking about them. We only go back. Thank you. We only see and hear content from those whose opinions align with ours. Part of this is literally algorithmic. Why is your Instagram so tailored to everything you're thinking, saying, and doing? Algorithmically, it's creating an echo chamber of everything you're already experiencing. So we're seeing things that it thinks we're going to like. And then we look for things that we're going to like. Our Google searches, our friends that we curate, the people that we follow are all things we want to like. So we're reinforcing that echo chamber. Affirmation from echo chambers causes people to become more extreme in views and values. This is because we're hearing the same things given back to us over and over. Our views are being reinforced and reinforced and more people are agreeing with them. And it's kind of easy to slide a little bit further one direction, a little bit further one direction, and it's still getting reinforced. And with that, it breeds kind of this extremism in anything. Have you ever looked at like cute animal videos? Right? And then your Instagram is just, or Facebook is loaded. They're like, wow, you really like bunnies. And you're like, I liked like 4 posts. But it pushes you to that point, and maybe you learn to really like bunnies from that. You don't know. Because those echo chambers are absent of sources that allow for a balanced examination, the outlets further reinforce and amplify that division. It's not giving us 7 sides to an issue. We're getting 1 side to an issue, tailored to us. So we're not even learning or expanding what we're seeing. I don't know how that wouldn't create division, because now we feel like we're really, really right. So the solution, and not the only solution, that's a simplified title, but part of the solution. We can't change what we don't understand. If you internalize nothing else, just try and internalize that. We can't change what we don't understand. We have to pierce echo chambers with outside information to create any change. I think of like a hamster running on a wheel, on the same wheel. It can run very fast, but it's not actually changing where it is. You have to bring in new information to expand your thinking, to expand yourself, to expand your understanding. And that information isn't always the stuff that we gravitate towards or the stuff we naturally agree with. Understanding begins with listening. We will talk a lot about listening, so just take that at face value. Studies have shown that fighting with someone can actually have the opposite effect and further entrench someone in their view. There's a lot of studies on backfire effect, things of that nature. But I always like to use children, for example, on this. Have you ever argued about it with a kid about going to bed? They like really want to stand their ground the more you argue with them. Do you know what I'm talking about? It gets very heated. We also have to break the barrier of isolation furthered by the pandemic, and also with what JR was talking about with the military, breaking that barrier of isolation. Thinking of how many people feel like they can't say something, feel like they can't have a different view, or feel like they can't talk about something if it's not just an amplification of that echo chamber. We have to break those barriers. So, what do we know? As we enter each exchange, each conversation, we have to try and remember things I'm about to talk to, about ourselves and about the person that we're talking to. Everyone is naturally trying to change everyone else's mind. This is because everyone thinks they're right, which sounds like a very judgy, mean statement. It's not. It's actually very natural, and that's okay. Because we wouldn't carry thoughts or ideas with us if we didn't think they were right. If I told you something that was completely wrong and you knew it was wrong, you wouldn't walk around and then espouse that to people and tell them. You would tell people because everything you've gathered, that you're like, I'm going to keep that information, that's cool. That's because you think it's right or correct or you agree with it. So it's okay that everyone thinks they're right, but it's something we need to be aware of. We need to know about ourselves and about everyone we talk to. Everyone thinks they're a good person. Same thing. We're all walking around as the protagonists on our own journeys. That's okay. But nobody's walking around going, man, that'd be really bad today. Maybe someone is. But even if they're thinking, I'm going to do something I don't want to do, it's probably for a reason that they think is good. That's what we have to figure out. That's what we have to understand. And everyone wants to be understood and loved. It's simple, it's clean, but it's beautiful and it's true. Okay, context for this. Understanding is not agreeing. When I do these trainings, sometimes people are like, yeah, but like I don't agree with any of that. Absolutely. I don't want you to change a lot of your beliefs and a lot of your values, anything like that. Stick with what you know. But understanding, it's not agreeing. One thing we talk about is knowing and honoring your limits. Know your personal triggers, your hot buttons, know what affects you a little more than maybe other people, know where your tipping point is, and think about that before you enter a conversation that's tough. Because maybe that person doesn't have the same trigger hot button thing of that nature, so they're going to push it a little harder, and you don't want to emotionally flood yourself. You don't want to be angry or upset. You want to know, like, hey, I know I'm like actually a little bit more, emotionally affected by this one issue, so I'm dealing with that, I'm learning that. I can only go to a 4 on the level of someone aggravating me for that. Know those limits, know those boundaries, because your mental health, your emotional regulation is so important anytime you're talking with someone who disagrees with you. For neutral subjects, all viewpoints can be given equal weight. I don't care if you like Rocky Road or Mint Chip or cats or dogs. I mean, I care, but it doesn't bother me. I don't feel a need to be like, you like Rocky Road? Like, where did you grow up? That's not what we're trying to do. But on the other side of that, opinions that are steeped in hatred or bigotry or those sorts of things don't have to be given the same weight as opinions that are not. You don't need to say, well, I guess I could see why, Adrienne's example of all Black people are the problem. I guess I could see that. Don't need to give it that weight in your mind. But don't have to agree with someone's opinion to listen to it. So we just try to respect that we're all human. We all deserve dignity. And we can listen to it, give them that respect as a human without agreeing and without giving it the weight that we would if their favorite flavor was mint chip or if it was a lighter subject that didn't have the hatred or bigotry. With that, what we want to do, the objective when someone says something that's like a hateful thing, get to the why. Get to the why. Get to the heart of those opinions. We don't know what drives those thoughts. Could be misinformation, fear, conditioning, or a combination of history. It could be a reason you never saw coming, and they tell you and you go, oh, I don't agree, but I can understand where that formed in you. I can understand why you might feel that way. I don't understand why people don't like dogs, but if I talk to you and you're like, well, I was bit by a dog when I was a little kid. Okay, I understand that now. I get it. Try a dog still, but I get it. And lastly, like Adrienne said, one of the most important points, we are not fixed, and we should all be afforded the opportunity to grow and change. Get addicted to it. Get addicted to the growth that you can have when you're talking to people that don't agree with you. Because man, it is addicting and very, very fun. Remember, just like we can grow and change, everyone we talk to can too. Even if we don't agree, even if they walk in, MAGA hat, flag on the back of an F-150. Everyone can change, and maybe they have some really interesting whys that allow you to grow. Are we good listeners? So we're going to assess, as it says, where we thrive and where we have room to grow, because now we're all addicted to growth. Listening stats, this is really interesting, right? So less than 2% of the population has any training in listening, yet it's a top business skill according to Forbes and many other companies like that. We don't do formalized training in listening. Now you all have a little bit though, so congratulations. I'd like to welcome you to the 2%. But that's such an interesting thing. We're learning this as adults to consciously listen, to take our listening to a new level. What a great opportunity though if you have kids, I'm just saying. So hearing takes in words. Listening absorbs meaning. I should also say that when I talk about listening, I don't just mean like verbal listening. It could be we do it with text. We also do it body language listening, or any kind of absorbing of meaning from someone is what I'm talking about when I say listening. And if we're just taking in the words, we're not actually necessarily absorbing the meaning. So what I think of this is, if you ever watch TV, but you're not watching TV because you're doing a grocery list, or you're texting someone, or your brain is somewhere else. And you look up and you're like, I don't know how those people got on that island. You were hearing everything, but you weren't listening because you weren't taking in the meaning of what was happening. It was just kind of washing over you. And we've all been in those conversations. And you might be doing it right now with me. That's okay. Listening should be active and participatory. If I'm giving you something, the gift of listening to me, then you're taking it. And then we do a little vice versa. And we kind of exchange it back and forth. It's active, it's participatory, it's engaging most times, or we hope it is. This is fun. We think much faster than we listen. So we're often filling in those gaps with our own words and views. We get these numbers wrong because they're on those notes, but it's something we speak around 200 words per minute, but we think somewhere between 800 and 2,000 words per minute. That is a giant gap. So what are we doing between taking in those words and what's happening in our head? Someone's standing there going, do you want to buy these pants? And your brain's going, those are really ugly pants. I don't like those pants. Those are disgusting. They come in another color. And you've had 17 thoughts around those pants. And sometimes those are judgments. Sometimes we're listening to someone and we're judging them internally. That's okay. Just be aware. Your brain's moving way faster than our hearing can take in. Oh, handling opposition. I had a conversation the other day about this. I'm excited to talk about it. So how do we handle opposition when maybe someone at a dinner table, like a family member, brings up something that we don't want to talk about because we know we're going to have to do one of these? So the 3 A's, if you like alliteration here, argue. We know what arguing is. They're showing it. We're stating facts. We're dumping everything at them. We're going back and forth. No, you're right. No, you're right. But we both think we're right. And it's going back and forth. It's horrific. We all know it can entrench you further in your views. It doesn't make you happy. It's exhausting. Do we avoid? Do we say, well, actually, we're not going to invite Uncle Jim to dinner this year because we're going to step away from that. That's super common right now. That's awful. That avoidance detracts from our community. It pulls us away from what we're looking for, from that unity, from that connection, from those people. That's avoidance. These are all protective mechanisms. We shouldn't blame ourselves for doing any of them, but if we're aware of them, we can start to make some better choices and start to think about new ways to engage with people that aren't the 3 A's. The 3rd A being accommodate. So you find solutions where no one's happy. That third middle where you're like, I guess mixing mint chip and rocky road together is the thing to do, and it's disgusting. Neither one of you is happy. That's accommodation. I like to use these ice cream metaphors to carry it straight through. But that's accommodation. It's not third-party solutions. It's not actively working towards something productive. It's just, well, now we both get to be equally unhappy. It's not effective. Think about those in your mind, which ones you kind of use. Watch situations. You're going to be like, oh, they're arguing. That's an A. And you're going to start to see them more and more. Here are some listening challenges. Apologies if I'm going very quick through this stuff. I want to get to the exercises. So here's 5 listening challenges. I'm going to enlighten you to what they are. Do you listen to hear? Do you listen to hear rather than understand? We're all experts on what that means, right? My TV metaphor. You listening just to like, okay, I'm present and the words are coming, but you're not actively trying to understand. You're not using that awesome 2,000 words per minute thinking that you can to process the information. Interrupting. There's that interrupting cow Lou joke that I can't do by myself, but put it in your heads right now, you know it. Do you interrupt people when they're speaking? And this is a lot of intelligent people that do this. This isn't like a skill for people that don't know how to be social and have conversations. We get excited or we get agitated and we get flooded with emotion and we can't even let someone finish that thought because ew, and we interrupt sometimes. It's a thing that happens. Rehearsing. Oh, if you're a very, very smart person with a lot of stats in your head, you might be rehearsing because so many of us do this. Or you rehearsing what you're going to say as someone else speaks. So what are you missing? What can't happen If you're using all your cognitive space to rehearse what you're going to say, what can't happen when the other person's speaking at that point then? What are you not doing? Listening, yes. You might have a great speech in your head, but you didn't listen to anything they're saying. And now you're just going to give them something, and they're going to give you something back. And that active participatory thing of you taking that information is missing. And they're probably doing the same thing. Mismatching tone. We'll talk a little bit about tone in a little bit. We'll do a tone exercise. But do you respond with an emotional tone that doesn't sync with the speaker? If you're not paying attention, sometimes you can miss the nuance of sliding into anger or sadness or whatever it is, and the tone that you respond with isn't appropriate. If someone was outraged about something and you respond with, yeah, that sucks, it's not the same tone as being engaged as I'm so sorry, that sounds awful. Match their tone, feed that emotion, take that emotion that they're giving, and then give it back to them in the correct way. Respond appropriately. Try not to mismatch that tone. Parallel talk, my favorite. Do you use someone else's stories as a segue to yours? And actually really reminds me of what JR was talking about a bit with the hollowness of not the thank you for your service. We're just saying that platitude. But it's not full of anything. It's not full of the information that they've given you. It's not full of understanding and knowledge. I talk about it a lot of times in terms of like trips and travel. So if someone's telling you about their trip to Greece and they're like, oh my gosh, we stayed at this beautiful place and we did this thing and it was right by the water. And maybe you recently went to Greece too. You have some cool stories too. And your response to their thing is, oh my gosh, me too. I went to Greece, I did this. You're trying to relate to them. It's not a bad intention. But man, is that hollow. You're not showing them at all that you listened to them or that you heard. Now you're just both talking at each other. You're just like two trains on parallel tracks that are never going to touch, but you're racing each other for some reason. And you're talking at each other and missing that critical component of maybe you did listen. Show them you listened. Ask them questions about it, just like the service. Ask them questions. Say, oh, that's awesome. Where did you stay? Oh my gosh, what was your experience like with that? And you can even relate it to your own. But ask them about it first. You'll start to see this. This is one I think most people didn't know about. And you'll start to see it a lot. And you'll catch yourself doing it. And just smile a little, think of me. But it's super easy to slip into because it is attempting to relate with someone. Again, it's very positive intention. But check these out. We normally do a poll online, but because this is anonymous, I'm not going to make everybody raise their hands on what they do, so don't worry. But be aware of those things. Okay, rapport. We're so close to an activity. I'm trying to get us there. So rapport. Building rapport is key. That's all that's on the slide. Okay, so here are some techniques to find and build rapport. Number 1, find common ground. When we talk about this, tiptoe at the start to find what triggers need to be avoided. Let them lay the ground for what they share. Again, relating so much to what Jared just talked about with being afraid to ask people about their service experience and them not wanting to say stuff. If you let them lead, they're going to tell you what they do and don't want to say. Don't go into, tell me the weirdest story from, no. Let them come in from the open-ended questions. If they want to share something, they will. Same with any of these issues. Tiptoe around at the start. Ask those open questions. Ask the very free response questions. And let them guide where that's going to go. Let them make the game board that you're going to have the conversation in, especially if it's a tough issue. We want to find that common ground, tiptoeing at the start to let them lead the way. Don't focus on differences. So at the start, make sure that you're not focusing on how you're different and instead on shared humanity or a neutral topic. Going in, even just mentally thinking, oh God, this person is this, we're not going to get along, we're so different. It's just setting you up for a miserable conversation and you're not engaging or building rapport with that person at all. Focus on potentially how you're the same. If you're walking around here You both live in Boise. That's one similarity. I don't care what your values are, you both live here. That's a shared thing. That's something that you can relate to, talk about, all those things. They might also like dogs, and I like to throw that out there because everybody likes dogs. But when you're looking at something like that, maybe that person's a parent and you're a parent. Think of those things, think of those potential things that you might be the same on. Don't walk in thinking, oh, good God, cool, this is how we're different. Focus on the other side. Find a value-based end goal, one of the most useful things in my opinion. Though you may have different tactics, you both may want the same end goal based in your values. Make that your focus. So, healthcare, for example. Say you're a big fan of universal healthcare. Say the person you're talking to is not a fan of that. What do you both want if you went more broad? Do you both want everyone in your family to be healthy? Do you both want your entire community to have access to medical care when they need it? What value-based end goal do you want? And we usually find that we're not all that different in that end goal. We're just fighting like cats and dogs about the tactics and about the means to get there. And we're thinking we're entirely different, but we're just looking too closely at the start and we're getting bottlenecked there and not thinking, okay, but at the end of the day, what do you want? Do you want kids to feel safe in schools? Fantastic, we are both on the same page with that. Let's use our different experiences and work backwards to get to a point where we accomplish that thing, accomplish the thing we both want, that value-based end goal. And listen, rapport is much easier to build when you're listening rather than speaking, because people like to share their stories. They like to feel heard. And being talked at, like you all are right now, you don't feel heard. It doesn't build as much rapport. So spend most of your time listening if you're trying to build rapport with someone. The rapport approach, 3 values that we bring into talking with people. Curiosity, my favorite value. You want to be truly open to learn from this person. Model yourself like a toddler, questioning everything as if it's an opportunity for growth. So when I enter a conversation I know is going to be tough, or I kind of already have a judgment about someone in my head because I think I know something about them, I think of that one and I go, okay, but if I was 4, I would have a different thought. Go in with those thoughts. Be genuinely curious about what someone's experience is like. Because if you go in mentally on that track, you might hear something you didn't expect, and it might open up something for you. But if you go in without that curiosity, might as well not even have a conversation. Humility. Treat others with respect, giving them the space to express their thoughts and opinions without fear of being condemned or thought foolish. A lot of people choose not to share their opinions because they're very scared. They're scared they're going to be judged. They're scared that someone is going to say, I can't be friends with you anymore because whatever it is. They're terrified. We talk about creating safe spaces all the time, and we don't always do it. We create safe spaces within echo chambers. If you agree with it, I say you are absolutely welcome to share as much as you want about the thing we agree on. But we don't create safe spaces for everyone. Come in with that humility. Remember that everyone has something to share with you. Everyone. And empathy. Try and understand how the person's feeling, why they might feel that way. It's a little self-explanatory, but go in searching for that why. Be like a detective. Find the why. It's the most interesting part, and it's where you're going to get the most out of it. Tone. Guys, we're so close. 2 slides away from the thing. So, depending on the medium, a lot of intended tone can be lost. What I'm referring to with this is text. So we do our program based in text. And as you all know, if you've ever gotten a text, you read a lot into it. You could read the same text 10 times, and depending on the mood you're in, the mood you think that person's in, you're going to read it differently. We always talk about, did you grab the milk? So if this lady If you made someone mad and you think this is at home and you get, did you grab the milk? You're going to read it as, did you grab the milk? Can you even do that? That's how you're going to read that. But if you know you've been a very pleasant person to be around, and there's no need for anyone to be angry, maybe you see that smiley person, and you're just going to hear, hey, did you happen to pick up the milk? That's how much you're going to read into that off of a neutral statement. Think about it, especially in text or email. What tone would I say this with in person? Say it aloud without any tone, and then see if it could be read differently. So, did you grab the milk? I guess I could see how someone might think that there was an expectation there. Maybe I'll soften it intentionally. Don't make tonal assumptions. If you're talking to someone you don't know, don't assume that they're already in a state of anger or in a state of frustration with you. They're probably not, but they will be now that you've assumed their tone. Try not to make tonal assumptions. And it's a great skill. So, tone tells. Next slide, please. Tone tells, my milk example there. Did you get milk? Did you finally get the milk? With a question mark. Hey, did you happen to get milk? Those are so different and accomplishing the same thing. We want to be looking for tone tells all over. We feel it a lot with body language. If someone's standing like this, or like this, or like this, tells us a lot. And we're picking up on that subconsciously. We're not even aware we're doing it. Become aware of the tone tells and kind of look for them. If we're looking at upper and lower case, a lot of this, again, is text-based. That's our program. Are we using soft opens? Are we using emojis? Have you ever read a business email and you're like, this person hates me, and then there's a smiley face at the end. You're like, they don't hate me. They love me. It changes everything. Don't be afraid to make your tone very obvious, especially if you don't know someone or in the case of text-based. Let's do the thing. This is the first activity. Trying to get there, guys. Okay, tone exercise. You're gonna get in a group of 3 or 4 people, up to you. Partners if you want, but I like 3 or 4. So I'm gonna give you some neutral statements on the next slide, similar to the milk thing, and we're gonna kind of do what I just did. We're gonna see if we can figure out ways to make it slightly positive, slightly negative, and then positive and negative. Can you ramp up your tone? Can you ramp down your tone? Can you make it incredibly clear that you are not angry at all? Can you make it very clear that you are angry? Let's play with that. Let's become aware of it. You can write it down if you want. If you want to practice the text-based, you're welcome to write it. But if you just want to do it verbally with each other, that's great too. Practice the tone tells. Body language, proximity. If you get really close to someone's face, it's either intensity or I'm very angry, I'm scaring you. See, it's effective. So let's take 5 minutes. The next slide's gonna have the statements. Play with these statements. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so these can all be neutral, or they can be very positive or negative. Play with these in your groups, and then kind of figure out why those changes made you feel one way or another, why that came across more or less positive or negative. Be free, 5 minutes. Okay, what did we see? Fake yelling at each other, if that was what we did. What observations did anyone have about this? What did anyone take away from this experience?
It's like talking to our teenagers.
Talking to your teenagers! Oh, that's fun. Do you think they practice this skill? We can make them aware of it, though.
Yeah.
But anyone else?
There's water there, Regan.
It's easier to do positive and negative, but it was harder to do neutral.
So we go see me. Fascinating. Okay, I love that. But that's good though, because then you can really get your tone across if you're good at doing the positive and negative. Anybody else? What other observations did anyone have? This is like your 4th time through.
It turned the volume seemed to make a big difference in the tone from what would be positive versus negative. It was pretty, I didn't notice it until it was pointed out to me.
I like that. But now you're going to be aware of it forever, huh?
Absolutely.
Now you're going to know when you're talking to someone, they're like, are you mad at me? You're like, what up? Was I 2 decibels higher? Is that what happened? That's awesome. That's a good observation.
No, I just like this exercise because it's so clear that tone matters. Like we were saying, literally the same words, but like communicating something completely different.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, communicating something completely different.
Oh, I love it.
Yes. Yes. That was great. That was awesome. But absolutely, the same words communicated something completely different. Punctuation, like again, the questionation mark is what I call that question exclamation point. That's very urgent if you get one from me. And then you have like the ... texters, that means a whole different thing. You know what I'm talking about? It's called an ellipsis.
Let's feel it.
So the one that I thought was really interesting is, are you hot or cold? And like when we're asking questions where our preferences are known, it's a loaded question. And I think tone takes on a lot more importance in that sense, because like when I ask my kids, are you hot or cold? I know what I am, and I know what I want to stay, and I know who's got to vote. And so, like when I just in feeling that, my tone is always wrong when I ask it, because I'm like, it ain't a question. It's like, you need to get used to this, and it's just really kind of, man. I think understanding power dynamics and how they go along with tone is important. Because I find that within my own organization, I text a lot, and I put up way more smiley faces, hearts, and thumbs up than I used to, because nobody wants to hang out with a curmudgeony old bastard. We need to communicate like decent human beings and not carry all this stress with us. So I think, again, tone is about time. Tone is about slowing down. Tone is about patience. Tone is about understanding how the other person is going to receive the message. Lovely, thank you.
Awesome, and that's such a good point about almost knowing your audience and the context. Oh yes, because he's right. If you're asking, like if I'm asking my boyfriend, is it cold in here? It is. It's always cold. It's never warm, and he's like, yeah, I'll turn up the heat.
I have a lot of Southern relatives, and they can say things that sound so sweet.
Oh yeah, bless your heart.
You know that they're not needing something sweet. It's very passive aggressive.
But it's such a good point, and we all said it at the same time. That bless your heart. No, absolutely. That's 100% a part of it. Also, when you're talking about the thumbs up, made me laugh, because if you know, like, passive aggressive girl, that a thumbs up is not, like, if you're getting an emoji thumbs up, hey, you really made someone mad. Like, it's a whole thing. But there's a lot of subtext in tone, a lot of audience understanding, and a lot of practice. And sometimes we have to make our tone so almost disgustingly candy sweet clear, if that's our intention. But it's something to be very aware of and practice, and it's fun. You can be like, I'm gonna take this statement and make it 4 different ways. It's a blast. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Good job. Next thing, more skills for productive listening. Okay. This goes into a really awesome exercise. People that have done the training before will see this as a repeat. Ask better questions. Almost everything today has talked about asking these better, open-ended questions. So what's an open-ended question versus a closed question or a limiting question or a leading question? Open questions invite others to tell a story in response. Closed or leading questions elicit a specific or direct answer. So with an open question, I want you to give me a story. I want you to tell me some experience or something. Like what Jared was saying, what branch did you serve in? There's not one right answer. There's a bunch, and then they can elaborate if they want to. Open usually begin with who, what, how, where, or when. Usually begin with who, what, how, where, or when. It's not a hard, fast rule, but if you're trying to think of an open question and your brain goes to one of those things, you're on the right track, and it'll be a little easier. Those questions elicit a story. A when? Story. Where? Story. How? Story. We say notice why is missing, and this is especially with text. Why can definitely elicit some open questions. 100%. It's the motivation behind. However, why can sometimes feel a little judgmental. So I'm going to go to the store. Why? Because I'm hungry. Whatever it is, there's an inherent judgment that we sometimes get with why. A lot of times, especially via text, we try to avoid it just to make sure that we're not mixing up that tone so that why isn't coming off as a judgment call, as like, I don't understand why you're doing that. If you know how you want someone to respond, it's not an open question. So as we take people a lot of times through the texting training, we still kind of, some people can come in with a mentality still of like, I'm a spy and I'm trying to figure out what the other side's thinking. And they'll lead someone in a question, or they know how they want them to respond. You know, why do you like Trump? Whatever it is, not a why, don't listen to me on that, but say you say that. What they're thinking for that question, they want you to say, oh, I like him because all these policies I disagree with, whatever it is. If you're coming in thinking you know the answer, just don't ask that question. Abandon that. Capture that curiosity. Ask a genuine question. Don't go in thinking you know something. The goal of open questions is to gain new insights, not confirm. So kind of related to those two things. We're looking for new information because we're curious toddlers. New information that elicits a story. That's the big thing with open-ended questions. Lastly, just as a little tip, do you think, followed by an opinion, is a confirmation, not a question. Going simple, I mean, do you think that the only flavor anyone should ever eat of ice cream is mint chip? That's a statement with, well, do you think? And if someone says no, they're kind of already feeling a little judged in that. Do you think, followed by an opinion, is a confirmation. You can ask it if you're looking for confirmation. But if you're looking for an open-ended question and you're trying to figure out something new because we're curious toddlers, avoid that. Okay. So these are some questions. Adrienne mentioned the guide, which has now been revised and fun. I think it might be 64 pages now. But that's in there. A lot of these are from that. You can take a look at those or the guide or come to a training. But here are just some examples. I won't go through all for time. But my favorite one I will highlight. How have your opinions or thinking changed over time? Oh, it's highlighting the growth and it's so good. But asking that gives a lot of room for growth and talking about how your own opinions might have shifted over time, which is a really great way to make people feel comfortable to kind of share that vulnerability with them. Okay, so I'm gonna give you kind of an example. So say I task you with figuring out which car someone owns in a giant car lot. It's an imaginary car lot, but it's a giant car lot. 100,000 cars here. And your job is to figure out which car Harry owns. So say you do that using closed questions. It will look something like this. So, all right, what color is it? Blue. Is it an SUV? No. Is it a sedan? Yes. It's a hybrid? Yes. Blah, 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 blah. Kia, 2023, custom plates, any decals. And you have to come up with all these like differentiators. And even then, you could end up standing in front of like 25 Kias being like, I don't know. Is it pretty? Like, whatever it is. Now imagine, next slide please, that you asked an open-ended question. Imagine you said, what drew you to your car? And they said, well, I'm a giant Superman fan. It'd be pretty easy to find that car on the lot. Or if you said, when did you get your car? And they're like, I can only assume 16. But, if they're like, I got it when I was 16 and really into comics. Like, you're like, I think I can see the one. Those open questions, not only do they invite the story, they're going to tell you the most important information first. They're going to tell you what's unique or different or interesting. That guy's not opening with like, it's a blue Kia. He's like, I have Superman on my car. That's what they're opening with. So look at how much time you would save. how much more engaged everyone would be, and how much faster you'd find that darn car. We want to be thinking about those things. So now we get to practice yet again because we love talking with each other. So, this image is going to confuse you. Just ignore it and I'll tell you what we can do. I made it one time. It's not anyone's fault. It's just lived on too long. So, okay, we're going to do a questioning breakout. We're going to do a little game. We're going to play with open questions and closed questions, so I want you guys to feel the difference. So in groups, you can form new groups or stay with the same group, whatever you want, no judgments either way. And you're going to go ahead and one person is going to be the it person for that round. And they're going to pick a favorite thing. Animal, car, movie, TV show, food. Food is always really good. Pick a favorite thing. Everyone else is going to then try and kind of figure out your favorite thing. And you're going to pick ahead of time, are we using closed questions first or open questions? So say we're going closed question round. Cool. So-and-so's favorite food. Closed questions. Is it a vegetable? Is it green? Do people consider it nummy? Whatever you want to ask in that closed question format. See what that feels like. See what happens. See if you get there. It's okay if you don't. Ask a couple rounds of questions. If you don't get there, you can stay on the same person and then go to open. If you do get there, awesome. Or you can just switch to open in general. Then try it with open questions. So, where were you when you first ate your favorite food? And if they say, I was in kindergarten, that changes the palette. If they're like, I was in France, that changes the palette. You get a lot of context, right? When did you do this? How did it taste? What were the flavors? Give me good open questions, and they're gonna be way more fun. My caveat, you cannot ask, though an open question, what is your favorite blank? That is cheating. I will be mad. Don't do that. Come up with creative ways to ask. Look for the stories, right? We all just learned what an open question was. You're gaining new insights and you're asking stories. New insights and stories. So does that all kind of make sense? Yeah? Well, you don't count, babe. You've already done it. So you get to be the pro in that group then. So, okay, if anyone has any questions, ask me. You're gonna have 7 minutes and then switch people. Sorry, I forgot to say that part. So once you've gotten it or come close to, switch to the other person, find out their favorite thing. Ideally, everyone gets a go, so, speed through. What did you guys think? What did you notice was different about closed versus open? What was your experience?
Much faster with open. That's shit. Much faster with open.
It was faster with open, which I also witnessed over here. Did other people feel like it was kind of similar with that? When they asked to open, it got a little easier and faster? That's the general consensus? Good, it's supposed to be like that. So we hope. What else? Anybody else feel anything? What observations?
Well, the connection that you feel in the open one versus just the yes, not right.
Absolutely, because the stories.
Yeah, on the stories also, I was going to say when I was doing the open questions, it led to more open questions naturally, like a conversation. As opposed to I was actually having to think of questions when it was just yes or no. That sucks, man.
Absolutely. Great. It's like watching a bad date. It's just you're watching, you're like, oh god, that's not going well.
When I was being asked the open questions, I felt more obligated to answer, to give the full information, to give it away, basically.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's also the point. You were the Superman car. Because you want to tell the story, and stories capture so much of that information. You're like, I'm going to absolutely tell you about my favorite thing. But that's the point.
But we got to know her better, too.
And you got to know her better. Yes. I love that. Any other observations? Anyone else? Someone at the tables. I'm going to end up calling on you, Bae. It's the second time that's done, if no one else. Great.
No, this time I experienced it as I had a favorite movie, and I appreciated the open questions because I was able to talk about it. And because I love it, I was actually able to share, so it felt more, I didn't do it without you on demo, but that was felt nice to be able to share something I care about.
Yeah, because people love to share their stories. And what's your favorite movie? Even though it's cheap.
All About My Mother by Theodor Adorno.
Everyone check it out. I have not. But that's awesome. That's exactly what we want to see. It kind of, when I was just looking around and walking around, that's almost how they all play out. The closed are very transactional and very just closed. And it feels like the DMV. So they don't care about your life. But, you want the good date. You want the stories. So that's awesome. I'm glad you guys experienced this. Also, carry those conversations further because it's everyone wanted to talk more and I had to be a buzzkill. So talk amongst yourself after that. Okay. Think of a dog in your head. Think of one, get a really good image. Okay, what color is it? Gray. Okay, what color is yours?
Brown and white.
Brown and white. Great. What color is yours?
Reddish.
Awesome. How many pounds does yours weigh?
70.
70. How many pounds does yours weigh? Your dog that's in your head, just any number you want.
40.
40. Perfect. Do we have a shedder? Is yours a shedder or a not shedder? A shedder? Yep. Anything else? So that illustration, we all had very different dogs in our head. I had that guy, because that's mine. What is my kid? His name's Brody. So I had about a 50-pound Doberman in my head when I'm thinking of the word dog. That's the schema that I have. That's how I understand the world. When I initially think of dog, and of course I know other dogs, but that's the dog that comes to my head. For some people, it's going to be Aaron. He can play basketball. For some people, Wishbone, Scooby. Some people are thinking a cartoon dog. Absolutely valid. And then Bruiser Woods. And the interesting part with that is, if I was to say something, my dog is 16 and a half and has some medical issues sometimes. For the most part, he's doing great. But sometimes he doesn't do the stairs very well. So I have to pick up my 50 to 60-pound dog, who's very squirmy, and walk him downstairs. It's very difficult. So I could make a statement like, man, carrying dogs downstairs, rough day. And if all you're thinking of when talking about dogs is Bruiser Woods, who fits in a purse, you're going to be like, you're really being a little dramatic. That's not correct. Our schemas are completely different, and it's changing the way we're thinking of different things. It's the majority of that. So that's preferred language. I'm going to illustrate this more with more activities, but thank you all for sharing your dogs with me. Just keep those things in mind when you're talking to someone. You could say a word like democracy or like socialism, and your head has one thing in your head. It has a 50-pound Doberman in your head, but they have Bruiser Woods in their head. It's not the same conversation. So we have to get an understanding of what the terms mean, what schema we're looking at. Great, how are you defining that? How do you think we get to the shared meaning? We just did it. Oh, I expected everyone to say open questions. That's the answer, open questions. So we get to the shared meaning, we get to understanding that my dog is 50 pounds by asking open questions. Oh my gosh, your dog sounds amazing. What does he look like? There we go, done. So, number 1 through 9. What color do you associate with the word grass? 5. Everybody. Nobody said a different thing. Fantastic.
6 right now.
Okay. Now, what color do you associate with the word grass?
8.
8, 5, 7. Most of them. Some of them are coming off a little weird, but most of them. It depends. If you're a person who's out in nature a lot, you're going to be like, crabgrass or other grass that I don't know the term of. Or you could be like, oh, is it summer? That's yellow. Is it this? There's so many different things that influence what we're going to think of with grass. The point I make between those two things is when it was more defined, when you're like, well, it's not these colors, it's obviously green, it was really easy for everyone in the room to say 5.
Except there's an assumption you don't have colored like people because that's going to say 6.
Oh, I love that. I almost gave the caveat, and I should have, to be a better person. Spot on. I always choose a color other than green as well because that's the colorblind color.
I think it's great because there's assumptions, right?
That's true. Another lesson we just learned. That's absolutely true. You're right. You're right. That is very interesting. Is that there's even more context than that. And the difference between the last 2 slides we saw, the primary-ish colors and all these greens, this is basically a term that can have nuance. All of that has nuance, questions, context, everything behind it. Now, the most controversial. What about the word tennis? What color?
8.
3. Bill.
Is a tennis ball yellow or green?
Yeah.
Yellow? Yes. It is one of the most highly debated things in psychology is the color of a tennis ball, if it is more green or more yellow. It's technically considered optic yellow. But most debated thing, if it's that specific and that nuanced, imagine how many questions we have to get to. It's not an issue when it's isolated, but what if I was to say, hey, we're going to prom together, buy a dress that's the color of a tennis ball. And you showed up in something very green, and I was like, I'm wearing yellow. It would be ugly, and we wouldn't like it. But that's the idea, getting to these questions, figuring out the nuance, and knowing that there's so much to unpack in every term, every schema, every dog, as it will. So, lots of color. Activity. Activity, this is, if you've ever played Hues and Cues, it's basically Hues and Cues. So, we're gonna get with our same groups. If you have to leave, totally cool and understand it and get it. If you have a minute to play with me and or you're coming to the reception, hang out because this is fun. This is a game, literally just letting you play a game. So we're gonna go, and this is gonna be a little bit bigger. It's gonna have a grid of numbers and letters. You're gonna have your partner, you can do it partners, threes, whatever you want. Pick, can you go to the next slide just so you show? Pick an area. So say I picked 25E. And it doesn't matter if it's exactly the general area. So 25E, and I'm gonna give Kyle a one-word clue to get him to pick my color. I'm gonna say, Kyle, Barney. And Kyle's gonna say, okay, I remember Barney being hyper magenta. He's gonna say, all right, I think 19C. And I'm gonna be like, where did you grow up? But he's gonna be a little different from where I am. Our perception, our thoughts of what's there is gonna be different. And I also didn't tell him what I picked, by the way, I kept it a secret. So pick one, keep it a secret. That person's gonna guess. You're gonna say, no. And that they're gonna ask you a couple questions to see if they can get it closer. They're gonna say, are you thinking more like the cartoon or like if I was to see it in a plushie? It's a little different. They can be closed, they can be open, it doesn't matter. But ask a couple clarifying questions and see if you can get that answer to shift just a little closer to where that color lies. And it's already going, I love this. Does anyone have any questions? Great. Okay, so go ahead, take a couple minutes, and yeah. When we do this, we want to, when we talk to people, I call it flavored language, flavored vocabulary. We want to inject as little of our own flavored vocabulary as possible. I don't want that to be confused as like, I can't be myself. You can hear I have a very specific way that I talk and things and colloquialisms that I use. Bring those in, those are great. But flavored vocabulary, one example we'll talk about right now, and you'll get this all and more in the training if you want to take it ever, but this is the perceived scale of respect. People's words choice will give you a lot of insights into their feelings about a given subject, their motivations, their values. The interesting thing that we do is we inject tension, sometimes a little subconsciously, by using things on a very different end of the perceived scale of respect. So if someone said, man, Sleepy Joe's ruining everything, and our response, though an open-ended question, if our response was, what is it that President Joe R. Biden is doing that's affecting your life negatively? Question itself's not a problem. But can you see how automatically that person feels a little like, okay, we do not have the same way you potentially had if you read Sleepy Joe or if you read something like that. So we want to be cool. We want to be awesome people that create new standards for that. So we are going to try, when we're talking to someone who doesn't agree with us, use terms neutral. Try to use terms in this middle area of the perceived scale of respect, or pronouns. What is he doing? What are they doing? Those things will get you into a lot less trouble because you're not injecting that tension. Because we've all said that, where we're just like, you know, like a little biting thing, just like a little comment there where you're like, no. Like if someone's like, your stupid butt pooped on my lawn about my dog, and I'm like, my precious angel son could never do that. It's very different, and it's intentional. I'm intentionally being like, you're an idiot, don't be mean to my dog. I wouldn't do that, I'm pretty nice, but that's the goal, right? You can see how those things inject some tension. So, I promise I won't make you do another activity, even though I thought I was going to. Don't pay attention to the top part, you can. we're just gonna think of a term and we're gonna come up with together kind of this perceived scale of respect and just throw out a couple things, a couple different ways to refer to people. I mentioned Beyonce earlier, we're not gonna do that one, but Beyonce, if you call her Queen Bee versus like, I don't know, a bad singer, whatever it is. Those are very different. We wanna try and use neutral terms and or pronouns when someone is using something at an extreme side that we don't agree with. So I'm gonna use cat as my neutral term, big animal person here, and people have extreme feelings on cats. So cat is my neutral term. What is something that might be a term for a cat that is very low on that perceived scale of respect? What would someone potentially call a cat that would show that they have not a lot of liking for cats?
Fleabag.
Fleabag! That's a great one. Very low. What else?
Turd.
Turd! Absolutely! Absolutely!
Trash kitty.
Trash kitty! 100%! Yeah, I don't think that person likes cats. I think we called my cat one like little baby blender paws, and that was a very sweet one, but like, you know, claw machine. Murder mittens! Yes! I like that. That's funny. That's a good one. Or like scratch machine, or Fleabag was such a great, perfect one at the start. But those all show really negative view. If someone came in and said, ugh, you have a Fleabag, watch out. That will hurt you. But if I didn't want to create tension, if I didn't want to make them angry, I would come in and say, you know, what about my cat, a neutral term, or what about her do you not like? Versus, what about my daughter do you find offensive? You can see how that's different. My fur baby was a perfect example. So if you're full support cats, what are some terms you're going to use for cat? I've heard fur baby, which is a great one. Princess. Kitty is a good one. I was going to say we have no cat supporters here, but we got some. It's good.
Assigning son, daughter to our animals is like jagging, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's really elevated.
It's crazy people elevated. I'm aware of it. And that's okay. I do it because it's funny. But those things, those perceived scale of respect, it's something we need to be aware of when we're having these conversations with people that don't agree with us. Because you're going to hear some vile terms. And your response is going to want to be to almost overcompensate and up that like level of respect. But you're just kind of killing the conversation. You're just adding tension that doesn't need to be there if you're trying to productively move them to maybe where they come into the next conversation with a neutral term. That's the goal. But you can only get there if you're not pissing people off left and right. So thinking of that, thinking of the terms you use and where they would fall on a perceived scale of respect is really helpful in creating a cohesive and creating a conversation that doesn't cause agitation. I think I'm done. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for hearing through everything. I appreciate your activity and your participation in those activities is amazing. And so many of you guys were smiling the whole time, so you guys should all be friends because everyone looked very, very happy. Thank you again so much for giving us the opportunity to share that with you. Training right there if you feel like coming. Full 6-hour training, you'll do this and some more, and then learn about our texting program as well. I'll pass this to Adrienne.
Well, yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Brie. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I just wanted to, a couple comments. I love Brie's approach because it makes this doable, right? It breaks it down to a point that we can actually start practicing these things. And yet, remember, I think it's like we have work to do on the progressive side and we have work to do on the other side. Not to say sides, but I find myself in rooms with leading social justice organizers, activists, constantly. And even in those rooms, Dana, you'll agree, right? We cannot figure out what we mean by democracy. We can't figure out what we mean by winning. There are so many things that we grapple with because we have it fixed in our heads, what we think we're talking about. It's absolutely essential if we're going to actually build the kind of movement that we need. And so I would say it is both and, right? So talking to people in our own communities, learning to really talk about what is it that we're actually saying. What is it that we actually mean? And then also navigating difference, right? Or perceived difference. Because often we already have it fixed in our head what those differences are, but we've never had the conversation to understand if they exist or what those things might mean. You know, again, because this operates daily, it's practice. We only ever get good at something that we do, right? And practice. But it is essential. When we started this conference, we talked about what is needed in this moment: cultural, social, and political change. And we can't have one without the other. It's like a stool. And if we forget about the cultural part or the social part, it can't stand. And so just really thinking about this in terms of what are the implications, what are the broad implications for us to be able to orient differently in the world, to make sense of it, and to move. You know, movements only happen when there's movement. But to move, we must be in partnership and relationship with people. If there is a hero in the story, it's people. But it's our job to form those connections and build that community to get to that world we want to create together. So thank you so much. Please, sign up for the training. It's also, there's an incredible community of people who are doing this that are supporting one another. Bay was just in a training the other day. Bree actually came to UVI as the associate director through this training, looking for how to make some meaning and to do something that was effective. And it really is giving people the skills. I will also say that it is intentionally reaching out to people who are predominantly white in a way that is not performative allyship. And that's really important. Most of the folks that we consult with who are our advisors to the project are women of color who are looking to us to do this kind of work, to build a movement that requires us doing the hard work in the hard places.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah.
This is really structured around texting, right?
Yeah.
And it came, if I heard you correctly, it came out of a need to be able to reach an audience during COVID, right? Or is it pre-COVID?
It is COVID. I just have to add in before that it did start because of COVID in terms of needing to go, because the program was so successful in asking people on doors,
Right.
Asking people what they wanted. To figure out how to continue that via text was like, ugh. But the benefits that we've realized now via text message as a form of practice, we talk about like these conversations on training wheels essentially, because with text messages, you can step back, consciously think about what you're going to write,
Right.
practice it until it gets internalized. Then you take it to the grocery store. Then you take it to your family because it's second nature. You already know what you can say. You've already practiced all these skills. But seeing the texting as a form of like practice was a benefit I don't even think we saw coming as much as it did. But to be able to practice on your own schedule as well, with all those people as that form of outreach, the benefits are so huge that it came as a necessity, but it's this huge asset now.
Right. Just an observation, a thought that was going through my head as you were talking in that meeting was that, one, I could see that, a benefit outside of a COVID environment. I could see a benefit of safety and security.
100%. Yeah.
I could see a benefit of, reaching a lot of people much more rapidly than knocking on doors and walking the streets, driving to the next neighborhood, and so on and so forth. And so I can see all of those, and what I'm hearing from this today is it was kind of a game changer in organizing, a game changer in getting a message and holding dialogue and discussion.
Yeah. So the thing that is really startling is how many people aren't used to having these kinds of conversations. And I mean, it's a lot of learning, but I think we heard from so many people who were literally transformed by the program of using the tactics in their own community, pausing for a second and thinking, okay, but what if I responded in this situation like somebody I was texting with?
Right.
And the dramatic results it was having, like for poll workers, for people, at the PTA meeting, in real world spaces.
Right.
What we weren't able to get to fully today is the arrow. So this is a multi-phased program, right? So the ARC, the authentic relational conversations, though it is throughout, it's the origin, right? It's like you come in through the program. We don't intend for people to stay in it.
Right.
We want to graduate people through it. So you go from this, and then we get to a second phase, which is like, okay, now we know that we really want to have some more intentional conversations where we can kind of start pulling at those threads.
Right.
Now we understand what the threads are. And then it's place-based organizing in the field, in places that have been historically abandoned and sacrificed. So this conference, is an example of ARROW, authentic relational organizing. But we are really working to go to other places across the country and do this work on the ground with the network of partners that we have created, so that folks that haven't had the opportunity to get this kind of conference, get these kind of trainings, have people on the ground with them, will finally have that opportunity, and then networking those communities to each other so we can really build a U.S. like rural strategy
Right.
to connect communities.
So one other curiosity of mine is that if I'm receiving this, I live in a rural town, let's say in Idaho, council, and I get a text out of the blue from you, and how would I normally respond to that? Delete.
Yep.
Block. I don't know you. Right?
So me too, which is the fascinating part. And I had no idea. I mean, again, we were just trying to figure out how can we do any outreach.
Right.
But we've had 489,000 conversations in those states that I mentioned. It's unbelievable, right? And so it is, how do we do something at scale and at depth?
Right.
And so technology is a big part of it, right? But it's also never going to replace the human connection and community building that needs to happen. But it's building the skills and the muscle to be able to do that effectively.
It's practice.
Yes.
Maybe one of the surprises I had getting involved in this was the response rate. Getting actually to conversations, the conversation rate, let's call it, was actually pretty darn good, right? It's almost 3%, I would say, on average. Meaning a conversation of more than 2 to 3 back and forths. And compared to market research, if you're just cold calling, that's pretty darn good. Really.
Yeah. And people love to share what they're outraged about. That's why a lot of people come in hot and angry, because like that text that interrupts people, they're stoked then to tell you all the problems that they see because they think they want to. People love to start a fight online. Love it.
And again, people in these areas, right, are feeling very isolated and alone. They're feeling detached from outreach. And so, I mean, it's fascinating. It really is.
Right.
But just the mere ask leads people to want to share. And because it's all self-declared, we're getting a lot of information. One thing I neglected to say is for each place that we're going around the country, we're doing it by zip code, where it's hard to organize or where there's an uprising of, extremist activity. So each group that we work with on the ground, particularly groups that are comprised and led by people of color, where it's very dangerous. We are giving them the information that we gather so that they understand now, here are the things that people have said that they care about or are concerned about by area so that they can more effectively organize in their own communities. Yeah.
A text both with some at a rhetoric first goes out for or is an era.
Yeah, you're a volunteer with United Vision for Idaho. And we're reaching out because, we want to ask, if our country seems more divided than it's ever been. And we're just asking what you think is causing that.
But it's your
No, none of your information is attached.
It's a computer program. So you're not texting from your phone. You're on a website with an anonymized number that goes out. So none of your personal information. We have some texters that have female names and have changed the name that comes up as, hi, this is so-and-so, to like a neutral or a masculine name just to see the different results. So everything's super, super safe and super anonymous.
And I would say that is, you rightly point that out, Charlie, right? Because I am deeply concerned about the future of canvassing, particularly in areas with open carry and stand your ground.
Yeah.
And if you're a progressive, that's enough. Right? Bree was actually stopped on the street in Nampa, like, you don't look like you belong here. Right? So safety is always paramount, but I will say that one thing that people learn through this is the art of de-escalation. So we can't just throw people on doors without the training to know how to navigate all of this stuff.
Right.
So it really is knowing how to get out of a situation, diffuse a situation, pivot to something else, right? And hopefully get to a point where even if we don't agree on everything, we should be found a starting point to continue those conversations and to bring people into community together. There's so much more, and also you get me all the time, and I am happy to do this. Bree is here all the time. We can do many more trainings in Idaho, but this is your resource. And again, I just hope that you all are feeling very, very proud that this is coming from Idaho. I always used to say, if you can organize in Idaho, you can organize anywhere. But everything that we build at UVI is designed to be a model across the country, hopefully successful, right? And a model across the country, because we've been so siloed. We can't continue to operate that way.
And Greg Carr was a partner in helping you with this?
He was a partner, but he invented texting.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Right, so
Yeah.
Foundation.
Foundation. Right.
But I just think that's an interesting story, right?
Yeah.
That now we've got this, kind of revolutionary program using texting that comes from a legacy in our town of the Idaho Anne Frank Memorial and the man who invented texting. So,
Right.
little factoid to throw around at your next cocktail party.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.